Awesome, awesome. Welcome back to the FST5 webinar educational series that we have once monthly with your co-host Manisha and Kobe Taylor. We're super excited to be here today. We have an amazing guest, as we always do, but we're super excited about our guest tonight. We have a great speaker for you guys. We're going to learn a lot of things tonight. Before we get started, and I introduce my co-host and then also our guest, I just want to remind everyone that Frontline Strong Together is the Michigan statewide resource for first responders and their families. Anything from crisis and intervention work all the way to if you just need someone to talk to, access to peer support, access to trainings. We are the one-stop shop for all of our first responders and their families in the state of Michigan. You can learn more about our program at www.fst5.org, or you can give us a call at 833-34-STRONG. Again, that number is 833-347-8766. So, Kobe, how are you? We had a month off.
We did. We had a month off, and I'm glad to be back, especially with the guest we have today.
Awesome.
It's a great honor. He always is willing to do this for us. It's great. Can't thank you enough.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Glad to be here always.
Thank you. So I'll briefly give you guys a little bit about our guest. Our guest is Dr. David Griffin, and he is a survivor of the Charleston Sofa Superstore fire, right? Am I saying that right?
Yes,
and now he's a commander and organizational leadership within his department. And he does frontline work for firefighters in the leadership role. He also does inspirational talks and conversations about mental health, mental wellness for first responders, specifically for firefighters. But I think you expand your work to all frontline workers, right?
Yes, ma'am. Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Awesome. We have, both Kobe and I have seen some amazing presentations and talks that you have given. So we were super excited to have you. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how much Kobe and I have talked about this and how excited we are about this talk that we're going to have today. So without further ado, unless Kobe, you have some other things you want to add, I will hand over the floor to Dr. David Griffin.
No, I'm excited to get into this. And again, thank you, Chief.
Awesome. Dr. Griffin, go ahead and introduce yourself again. Give us all of your accolades and tell us, before you get into the story, how you got into the fire service initially and how this has led to the work that you're doing now.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. David Griffin from Charleston, South Carolina. I was born and raised here, so I've lived here my entire life, which I'm very proud to say that because I love this area. So, you know, what I'm about to talk about for the next 45 minutes to an hour, this is not something I rehearse, or it's just going to be organic and come from my heart. But my organization I love, it's the organization I was born, you know, in the city that I work. So it feels pretty neat to have that pride of that, but it's also neat to see how much it's grown to bringing in people from all over the world really to work for Charleston and what we've navigated since we lost 9 firefighters on June 18th. And for me, being able to be a part of that, along with 246 other members who were on the job during that time, that's a heavy load that we carry. And I'm always very cognizant that I'm speaking on that piece of it. And there's 246 out there that hope that I'm speaking on it the most respectful of ways. And I carry that heavy because I don't find myself as being special. I don't find myself as being important. I wish, obviously, you never knew me. I wish I was just a firefighter on a rig or a captain doing the work that I really chose I wanted to do. And then this tragedy happens and you have 246 members of a department that are trying to find their way through this. And that's really what the story is for the next hour. It's good people with good intentions. And then after this traumatic event that happened to us, how do we navigate life? How do we navigate professions? How do we navigate life after the profession we chose? And, you know, I really think that's what I want to focus on is finding what makes you purposeful in your life. And for many people, that is different. And that's what's allowed me to be able to speak on this and be able to sit in front of this camera and give some words of advice that I can give. I'm not an expert. I don't profess to be one. I don't even like using that word because I think it's very scary. I think we're all knowledgeable in this profession. I think everybody on this class has a story to share. And I think you just have to be willing to share it. I've been with my department I'm in my 20th year. So I'm still learning. I still find myself wet behind the ears, if you will. There's so much I have to learn. Many of us have been thrust into positions that we just weren't ready for because we lost so many people after the fire. There was 246 of us on that day, and there's 52 of us left. And as of tomorrow, there'll be 51 because we have a gentleman who's retiring, which he did his full career and did a great job in Charleston. He was there a lot longer than me. So it's good to see these kind of stories playing out. But I don't really want to talk about my accolades. I don't really think anybody cares about that. So I'm going to move right on past that. But just trying to get into the story of, June 18th was a tough day for us. We lost 9 firefighters. And if you're a student of the fire service, you know what occurred on that day. We were good people with good intentions. We operated a way that we had done for a long time, and it was very successful. And there's many organizations that are that way. When you lose 9 firefighters, you lose 1 firefighter, you have a mental health injury in your organization, people are going to respond to it differently. And that's what we're seeing in our profession. We're seeing firefighters that are growing in the profession operationally and knowledge base, but are we giving enough time to mental health and behavioral health? My question always is how much time do you give in your recruit school to mental health and behavioral health? That's something that we do early on. I know this year we bring our students in on July 22nd for their first day of orientation, and July 24th, our first responder support team will be going to the classroom to talk about the services we provide for mental health. And that's huge because 2 days into their career with us, we're already telling them it's okay to talk about this job. It's okay to talk about the things that bother us. It's okay to talk about these calls that we're going to go on, or talk about the traumas we've had before we even joined the fire service. And that's what we're trying to capture, because what I've noticed in research and just experiences, when these young men and women come in to be firefighters in your organization, they're not just a blank canvas of no trauma. You have some of these young men and women who have been traumatized. They could have been sexually abused, mentally abused. They could have been a part of a traumatic event. You don't know what their story is. We've had combat veterans come in our organization that have done things that I'm just so proud of them doing. And I always say that because when they come in, I would ask that you treat them with respect, even though they're new firefighters. I don't believe that you have to yell at people and demean people to make them a good firefighter. That's just not my way of leadership. I think if you care for them and you teach them, they will learn more that way and they'll actually believe in themselves more, which is very counterintuitive to the way that I was taught in a military college. At the Citadel, you were yelled at and you did things a certain way, and that's just the way that I was raised. But I also have to realize I'm 43 years old. I am 20 years into this profession. We have 18 and 19-year-olds coming in that are different. And I actually enjoy that because we get to influence these individuals. But the most important thing I see is they get to influence us. Seeing how they respond to different calls, seeing how they respond to our leadership, good, bad, or indifferent. I've noticed that. And it's a journey that I really enjoy. And I hope that when we bring these new firefighters in, that we're giving them the skill set to be successful, not just on a working fire, which is something we do a small percentage of the time, but in life in general, when they go home with their family, when they're good spouses, husbands or wives or moms and dads. And that's really what my focus is a lot of times. And I don't want to go on too long without taking a question from you. So just stop me if I get a little bit too passionate.
Awesome. Yes. All of our guests know. And if you don't, I will state again, you can add your questions to the chat and the Q&A box, and we will read them off to Dr. Griffin as we go. So lead us in to that day of June 18th. Your experience, what happened, and the aftermath of that day.
So June 18th, 2007 was a Monday. It's the summertime in Charleston, so it's very hot and it's very humid. If you've ever been in Charleston, you know what I'm talking about. It's very just sticky and wet outside, so it's just an interesting climate, but I absolutely love it. So that day we went out, we did some training. It was myself, an acting captain who was very knowledgeable, and then a firefighter. Who was on the rig with me. He was 19 years old. So I always struggle with that because he was so young, and I was there to protect him, and I feel like I couldn't. So we go to the grocery store, we get dinner. He was actually cooking that day because he's actually a very good cook. So we go back to the station, we eat dinner. After we ate dinner, it was myself and him. We go out back, we just start cleaning the rig. We do something on Mondays in Charleston called Truck Day. It's actually kind of fun. You take everything off the rig, and for new firefighters and drivers, when you're taking the equipment off, you get to touch everything, you get to talk about it. And so that's what we were doing. And as we're doing that, little do we know, less than a mile down the street, the Sofa Superstore, the fire has just started a little bit before 7 o'clock. A passerby sees some smoke coming from the back of the building, but according to the radio traffic, you can tell that they don't know if it's coming from the Sofa Superstore or from a shed that's close by from another business. So he calls 911, he reports the fire. We respond a few minutes later. It's 2 engines, a ladder truck, and a battalion chief. The assistant chief actually responded with us as well because he was eating dinner with us. Him and the acting captain were really good friends, and he was just a really good guy when he came to eat dinner, told a lot of good stories, and we just enjoyed his company. So he responded as well. As we arrive on scene that day, you have an engine on the Delta side, and then I'm the engine on the Alpha side. You have a ladder truck on the Alpha side as well. And our firefighters, they're going inside to extinguish the fire. But as this fire is growing, there's a drop ceiling, and between the drop ceiling and the roof are lightweight trusses, and that fire is getting in the lightweight trusses. And if you would have come to me on Monday, June 18th and asked me, said, young man, do you know what a lightweight truss is? I'm embarrassed to say I would say I don't know what that was. I didn't know my job very well. I didn't take it as serious as I should, and I didn't really focus on those kind of dynamics. So when I talk about these things, I'm hoping a young firefighter hears these pieces and they think that there's something they may not be knowledgeable about. They can get out there, take a class, read more, talk to their experienced firefighters, and learn. So as the fire is moving through that drop ceiling, it's also making its way through the structure. We're calling additional units, single units. Back then, we didn't call second alarms or third alarms. We just called additional units as we needed them. Fire chief arrives on scene, and we're trying to manage the scene the best we can. As we're trying to manage the scene, we're into this pretty quickly. A matter of 27 minutes, you see the fire go from the Charlie Delta corner, which was outside in the loading dock and a pile of trash, out the front window. So very, very quickly, you see a change in those fire dynamics. And if you've ever seen the videos or you've ever listened to the radio traffic, you see how chaotic, and you hear the chaos on the scene that day. And we're trying to manage it the best that we can. As we're managing that, that's when we start to hear calls for help. We don't really know who they are. And when I say we, I'm really talking about myself. I wasn't sure who was calling for help because I wasn't really good at listening to radio traffic. I was just such a young firefighter. Again, I didn't dedicate the time I needed to knowing the parts of the job that I should have. And that's something I take very serious because this is a very serious job. You have to know your job, know your skill set, know why you're doing what you're doing. And I'm very hard on myself from my failures on that day. As we start to hear people calling for help, we do have more firefighters who are trying to help them. But as the fire is making its way through the front windows, out the front door, it's just it's not an environment that people can go back into. So we have ladder trucks. We're putting them in place for defensive operations. We're trying to figure out who we're missing. And we have search crews who are going to go inside the structure and do the body recovery for the firefighters. And I was not on those search crews. I've talked to many members from the search crews, and what they've experienced is just so traumatic for them. And I can't imagine what they saw, and seeing the pictures of what they saw and really looking at their faces when they were doing the body recovery. I feel for them to this day because it's put something that's probably etched in their mind that they'll never get out of their mind. And they have to deal with that and live with that every day. And they do it with grace and they do it with compassion. And, it's an honor to see some of those guys still on the job. And some of the guys that aren't on the job, they're still out there trying to do good things. We have, one of my buddies, Travis Howes, he's out there speaking about post-traumatic purpose. He's out there spreading the message. That's his purpose. He's very passionate about it. We have another a gentleman who was a captain. He does stair climbs in Charleston to honor not just the Charleston 9, but firefighters who have lost their lives. We have other captains that are very involved in the training of our people in our organization. That's their way of honoring and remember these individuals from what happened on that day. So back to the event. The morning after the event was June 19th. And from my recollection, I remember getting off scene and just leaving and going home and really not knowing how to feel. I didn't know, was this a part of it? Should I talk about it? And typical firefighter, I went home and I ate some food, and my wife was asking me questions, and typical firefighter, I said, I don't want to talk about it. ATF came to my house later in the day. They're going to investigate anyone who was involved in some type of line of duty. And I answered their questions. And that was Tuesday, June 19th. And then Wednesday, June 20th, I had that day off. And then I remember going back to work Thursday, June 21st. And it was very confusing of how do you navigate that? You have a lot of people bringing, breakfast, lunch, and dinner to the stations, but you don't really know what to say or how to feel because it's this terrible tragedy. And then when you get a call and you hit the Q siren to come out, the cars are stopping half a mile down the street to pay you respect to come out, which is not something that's normal. So you're trying to navigate this. You have a lot of people saying, thank you for your service. And, and you just don't know how to feel about that because you just lost 9 firefighters and you're trying to figure out, what happened. Plus on top of that, you're still running calls. You're still getting fire calls. You're still getting EMS calls. So, all those firefighters in the organization, all 246 of them came to work to do the job that they wanted to do, but with this huge traumatic event on top of them. So every call they went to, thinking about it. And that just is a trigger point to where it just runs through your head over and over again. And then Friday, June 21st, we actually had a breakfast as a department. And I remember the fire chief, he gave a speech about, what we were going to do that day. And I feel so bad for the fire chief because he had so much on his shoulders, and I couldn't imagine what he felt that day. I couldn't imagine what he felt that Friday talking with us and, having the courage to stand in front of us and talk, and then having the courage to go to that memorial service and sit on the stage. I mean, he showed a lot of compassion, a lot of grace. And I was disappointed after the event with how a lot of people wanted to point fingers at, 1 or 2 people. And I don't think that serves a positive outcome to an event. No one wanted this to happen. No one woke up on Monday and wanted this to happen. We did the job that we knew how to do to the best of our abilities. And this is a part of the learning process of our profession. In our profession, when you learn, there's significant things that occur. When you look at other professions, there's just not that significant of an event. Like today in my position, I'm the assistant chief of administration, which means I do a lot of paperwork. I'm a paper pusher. And I always say that just jokingly, but if I make a mistake on a spreadsheet, I tell my team that I'm not getting stressed about it because I've been on those scenes to where guys are in a building and they're stressed and it's chaotic. I'm not going to let a spreadsheet stress me. I'm more worried about the critical fails and the items that are really stressful for us. But when I say that, our job is life and death. It really is. Every call we go on, we don't know how the end result is going to be. And that weighed heavy on us. And then after that Friday, for the next 7 days, you do 9 funerals. And, we had buses full of our firefighters going to the funerals. You had us as the honor guard. I wasn't on the honor guard then, but they were carrying these 9 firefighters to the back of the rig and putting them on the rig and then going to the funeral and then carrying them from the rig to their gravesite and saluting every one of them, doing that 9 times in 7 days as an honor guard member. And, the captain that was the head of that honor guard then, he's still a captain with us. And it's really neat. He was actually my captain at the time. And to see him still working today and to see him still have that love for the job, but to also have that understanding that what he went through was very specific. He had to navigate 9 funerals. He had to navigate a ceremony of 9 caskets in front of 10,000 people at a very large coliseum. So that placed a heavy burden on this captain. And he's continued to come to work and he's continued to give a great effort. And he's always got a smile on his face. But I know deep in his heart, it does bother him. And those are the stories I like to share because there's so many of them. There's so many people in our department that have done so many great things after such a terrible tragedy. And I always try to highlight that because I'm myself and my buddy Travis, he's, we're talking about this a lot, and I don't want people just to see 2 people talking about it because it's not about us. It's about those people that really have done a lot since that event. So after the funerals, that's when it really got very chaotic. It was probably 5 or 6 days later. I can remember an article coming out in the newspaper, and there were people asking questions about how we operated. And, I didn't know how to take that because at that point I only had a couple of years on the job. So I'm reading, some of these articles, I'm kind of confused and I'm just trying to figure out where do we kind of go from here. And And then we had a leadership change. We hired Tom Carr from the outside, from Montgomery County, Maryland. So he comes into our organization. I mean, he is one of the most incredible leaders I've ever seen. The way that he's able to work with you on a one-to-one basis, but take your ideas and put them into play over time. And many of the things we do today are because of what he was able to bring to us. I remember one of the first times I went to his office. I tell this story all the time, so if you've heard it online, I'm sorry. But I walked in his office, very big office, and he had pieces of paper on the wall. They were easel pad pieces of paper. And he had notes of apparatus, stations, hose, all these things he wanted to do. And as we check those things off, I can look today and say everything that he wanted to do that we have done, plus way more. And it's pretty neat to say that, because after a specific tragedy, you can look at departments and they do try to make a difference and make changes. But a lot of times a budget could be a constraint for them. Where our city, our mayor at the time, he was very supportive. Our city council was so supportive, and they gave us what we needed to really progress our department to where it needed to be. And that's the exciting part. And still to this day, we have a new mayor, and he's very supportive of us. We have some new city council members and some city council members that have been on there for quite some time, and they're all super supportive. They know that we're trying to do great things, and they're the same thing for the police department. So public safety in our organization or in our city is very big, and it's nice to see how that's grown over these past 17 years since that tragedy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing. We do have one question from Dustin. Dr. Griffin, I just want to say I sat through one of your classes. Thanks, Kobe, and have such great appreciation for what you're doing. Has your department continued to keep track of those that left the service due to this incident? I know we do a lot for current responders, but what can we do to offer for those who have left?
I believe that is a piece that we're still trying to navigate today. So when our new fire chief, his name is Dan Curia, he came from Durham, North Carolina. So when he came into our department, one of the things that he really focused on was our retirees. And that was really nice because we hadn't had them involved in quite some time. So we started doing basic things, and I say basic because what I'm about to tell you is nothing groundbreaking, but I think it's very, very helpful to get the process started. So we just started reaching back out to them via email, phone call, and we started inviting them back into the folds of the organization to recruit graduations. And then he had an idea, Chief Dan, he had an idea to do a cookout for all of the retirees, but also for the entire organization in the month of December, 3 days in a row. So we have everybody on shift. They come and we serve it. One of our retired chiefs, he does cooking. I'm not going to call him by name because I don't know if he would want me to do that, but he does all the cooking, and it's awesome barbecue. So he cooks, and then we, as the command staff, we serve the food, and all of our apparatus cycle through in about a 4-hour period to eat. And as they do that, we have retirees that are there that are sharing stories about, what it was like when they were in the department, how are things changing today? And I think those stories are very valuable, but it gets them back into the fold of the organization. The next step was our deputy chief of operations. When he was put into that position, maybe I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, he had an idea to get them all into an app. Basically, it was called the Crew app at the time. Now we're using Signal. So it's basically a large group chat. And so on that app, it grew to over 100 retirees. And we would send messages there, about line of duty death remembrances of all the line of duty deaths we've had in Charleston. We'd send messages of, people's birthdays, wishing them happy birthday. If we had one of our retirees who had passed away, we'd send funeral information. So just any kind of message that we felt retirees would really want to be a part of, we would send that. And we're actually in the process of switching over to Signal. So we're still seeing some of the retirees going from one app to the other. So we're kind of in a transition now. But we found that to be very helpful. But the most important side, I think, is very unique to our organization. Now, this was when I was still probably an assistant engineer right after the fire, but an agreement was made that anyone that was on the job during that time has mental health care, free mental health care. So myself, when I go to my counselor, which I go to our counseling service, it's the first responder support team. When I go to my counselor, that is paid for by this agreement that we made a long time ago as an organization to support this. So each month we get a actual bill, and I sign the bill and it gets paid. And I say that because we've committed to these 246, even if they're retired and they're not on the job, and their spouses and their children. So we've really branched this out because we know that over time, this starts to affect many members of that family. And so there's different tiers of these individuals that are from that original group. But to say that, that's pretty powerful because to my knowledge, I don't know too many organizations that can say that they're going to fund that, for the duration of these individuals that have been on the job during that time. And then the other side of that for mental health, for our retirees, we have many of them that are actually a part of our peer support team. So it's pretty neat. We probably have 25 peer support members, and we have one of our a third assistant engineers. He's the commander of the actual, he's an engineer now, excuse me, engineer. He's actually the commander of the peer support team, and he does a great job, and he gets us together. And now we have an app for our peer support, and it's called the Peer Connect app. So we were able to get a grant through the state this for 2 years. And one of our assistant chiefs, I'm not going to call him by name again, I don't think that's fair, but he's done some great work for the mental health side of our organization. This was his work. He went out there and found the grant, and now everybody has the app on their phone, and the app is pretty powerful. And I can show it to you. So it's just called the South Carolina Peer Connect app. So as you open it up, it kind of looks like a Facebook, if you will, but it's not a Facebook. So the way that it works is every member of our organization, they download that app, and they've all been trained on this in a short session, because it's just an application. It's not anything super, super hard to do. But they download the app, and then they can go in and choose who their peer support members are. So there's a list of those members. They can check who they would like to request help from. So if they ever have a mental health crisis, or they just need to talk, or they just need to just somebody to listen to them, they can go in there and send a message. We get a text message, an email, and a message through the app that says you've been contacted by so-and-so. They would like a contact from you. And so then the 3 or 4 of us who are their specific peer support contacts, we will text each other and see who's going to reach out first. And then as we do that, we will either, one of us will reach out, and then we'll go to the station. We'll call them on the phone. We'll offer to come by the station, but sometimes they just don't want us to do that. We'll just talk on the phone, which is totally fine. But I think as we get into this more, I think it'll be utilized more. So in our retirees that are peer support members, they're also involved in this process too. So it's really neat to kind of see how we're continuing with the mental health side. I know for this year, part of our budget, we've just built that out. And, our fire chief and our 2 deputies, when they went through and built out the budget with the assistant chiefs, it was pretty neat. Their focus is really on the health and wellness of our people. And I think once we start to make, our budget requests public, once the permission is given from the fire chief, I think our members are going to be very pleased with, our number one request this year is to do with their health and wellness. It's for the duration of their life, because that's what we know is the most important. We want them, when they leave our organization, to be healthy. I read a post today that, firefighters, even when we retire, we are still worried about having some type of health event. It's something that's always going to be with us, because we don't know how these different events have affected us. Those structure fires that we've gone to, the diesel exhaust in the stations, all the chemicals that are in our gear. We don't know long-term how this is going to affect us as we grow. So it's something that we're really focused on, and it's really neat to see that.
Awesome. That's amazing. So one of the common questions that we get through the FST5 side is, after you've gone through a critical incident, something as big and as massive as the Charleston 9 situation on June 18th. What made the situation very unique is, just like you said, you guys had 246 members in your department, and so that's a lot of people. And typically our individual departments are not that big. So how did you guys handle all the vast levels of emotions that you had to kind of struggle through? Just like you said, some people were angry, some people did some, finger pointing. What were some of the things that you found worked for people as in the days after that event?
Well, at first, we really didn't have anything to turn to. We didn't have any mental health program. We just really turned to each other, and we talked to each other, and some of us, we were mad at each other. We were getting upset, yelling. I mean, there's fights. I mean, there's things that we don't know how to navigate this. We don't have any kind of skill set or management of our emotions at this point. It's just all raw, and this is when it was very eye-opening to me, is when I saw us just looking at each other like with no life in our eyes. We just didn't know what to do. I mean, there was a specific call about a week later. It was myself, my captain on my assigned engine, and a firefighter. And I remember going to that call. In the middle of the call, I got totally upset. It just hit me. And this is when I started realizing about these triggers and these flashbacks and the feelings of those emotions from that day replicating in your mind and getting you stuck in that event. And I think a lot of other people started to feel that. And when Chief Carr came in, he had an idea of this mental health, but also there was a gentleman in the area. He was a fire chief at another organization, and he was very passionate about mental health. And he is the reason why we have our peer support team, our mental health program in our area. He had this passion and this desire to help us. And he started this, and he had a couple of clinicians and himself, and it was like a grassroots effort. And he brought in FDNY firefighters who were knowledgeable about peer support, and they trained us to be peer support members, but they also talked to us as peers. They told us, this is going to be difficult. You're going to feel these emotions. At 5 years, you're going to have a mass exodus. At 10 years, a mass exodus. At 15 years, people are going to leave. We still have individuals that are struggling 17 years later. And I think that's a message that many firefighters need to understand. This is not a moment in time that is just stops and then you get over this a year or two later. You never get over this. You figure out how to manage it with the proper kinds of help. And that's what this fire chief from our area did. He just had this passion, and he's still that way today. He called me today asking a question, and he's just so passionate about trying to make sure that we're good to go, not just in our organization, but every organization in Charleston. So this grew from the Charleston firefighter support team into the Low Country firefighter support team. Now it supports firefighters, police officers, EMS, dispatchers, anybody involved in public service. And that's huge, because they all have a place to turn to when they're going through these types of problems. And as that started, you would see people going to the counseling services, and some would talk about it and some wouldn't. And I remember the first time I made the decision to go to this counseling service, my dad actually knew the fire chief who was responsible for starting this. So I had a lot of trust in him because of my dad. And so I called him. I said, "Hey, chief, I think I need to talk to someone." And he got me set up like 2 days later. And I went to my first counseling session. And I wasn't really sure about it. I didn't know what to believe in. I'd never talked to anybody about it before. And when I started talking to the counselor, I didn't really believe in it at that point. I was kind of standoffish, but over time, as I kept going and we started doing different modalities of treatment, we started with just talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and then we moved into EMDR. That's really when I had a lot of the success of processing the memories from that event. And I was able to remember a lot of things I had blocked out. And as I did that, I would go back to the station and kind of tell some guys about it, just kind of low. I wouldn't, say it too loud, because I didn't want guys to judge, or I didn't want to push it on people too much. But what I started to notice, that other guys were doing the same thing, and they weren't afraid to talk about it. For us in our organization today, we can go and sit down at a kitchen table and talk about mental health, and it's an open conversation. Our people are very open to it. There's no stigma to that. And I'm very proud of that, because that comes all the way from losing those 9 firefighters. Everything we are today is because of that event that has triggered us into continuing to work, continuing to make the effort to really make us a high level department. And I know that we're not perfect. And I don't want anyone on here thinking that I'm saying that we're a perfect organization. We are not. We struggle. We're not the greatest leaders in the world. We know we have faults, but that's where I go into another part of a message, is that as leaders, things bother us too. I know I'm the assistant chief of administration, but I still have feelings. Like, things still bother me. If I have a firefighter that for some reason doesn't like my demeanor or the way that I lead, that affects me, because I care about our people. I want to make sure that if I'm not doing a good job to influence them or inspire them, then I'm missing something here. And so that's kind of worn on me personally, being the last 2 years, really being off shift and being on day work. As an assistant chief, I really had to learn how to navigate a lot of that, because it's just it's a different mindset, if you will. When you're helping to lead an organization with 6 other assistant chiefs, 2 deputies, and a fire chief, there's a lot of heavy decisions. And those decisions come with hiring, terminations, they come with discipline. And these aren't fun things. This is not that, at 23 years old, when I said I want to be a firefighter, I didn't want to sit in front of someone and have to talk to them about something they may have done wrong because they're a human being. But it's the job that moving through the ranks and the responsibility that has been put on many of us now. And, we take that seriously. But the whole message I'm trying to make here is that just remember, as firefighters, your leaders, things bother them too. Like, I know our fire chief, things weigh heavy on him, and myself and him, we do some team teaching together. And one of the examples I always give is, how often do you check on your fire chief? How often do you just text them and say, Chief, I hope you're doing all right. I don't need you to respond to this, but I know there's a heavy load on you. And many people say, well, I won't do that because he'll think I'm kissing his butt. I have no reason to do that. That's why I like corresponding with my fire chief, because I can't do anything for my fire chief. Does that make sense? Like, he's not my friend because I can do something for him. He's the fire chief. He's already the number one. I can't do anything for him. And that's what I try to tell individuals, that your fire chief needs that support. Like, when you support that person, it gives them that courage and that belief in what they're doing to go forward and do even better than what they're doing. But if it's never that support there, sometimes they can question themselves. I do that sometimes too. If I send an email or a text message to a group and I say, hey, great job, I really enjoyed it, and I just don't get any response, I'm like, man, am I doing something wrong? Am I not communicating well? And that's just the human vulnerable side of me, because I'm still a human. Just because I have 3 bugles doesn't mean that things don't bother me as a person. And I think that's the piece that a lot of us navigate as you move through the ranks, because you want to be a part of that team on an engine company. But there comes a point in your career to where you're in a different level of the organization. And I think for us, I've really tried to, spread that message to leaders, is that check on each other, make sure your leaders are doing well, but also don't forget about the leaders in the field. Our battalion chiefs, they have a heavy load on them too. And, being a battalion chief and being a shift commander, I understand those challenges and navigating the shift work, and also scheduling. Scheduling is very difficult, especially when you're forcing firefighters and you don't have the people that you need. When our new fire chief came in, we had 70 vacancies, and we have 4-person minimum staffing, which means there's days we were forcing 15 to 20 people, forcing them to work to make sure we had 4-person minimum staffing, because that is a promise we made after June 18th, 2007. So, as I give these different examples, the goal is for you, as a listener, to understand that the mental aspect of this affects everyone in that organization, from the first day firefighter who's learning how to cook, make coffee, to the fire chief who is making decisions on how much money we utilize in our budget or who we hire. We all are affected the same way. We're just at different levels of the organization. I think when you navigate that with grace and compassion with each other, I think you build a stronger bond, but it's very difficult to do.
I think that's absolutely great. Another piece of this, I know you touch on it in your class, about your wife and how big of a rock she was for you, specifically during these times. And that's another piece I feel like a lot of departments miss, specifically after event, because I can imagine what they think, especially when we are coming home and we're not wanting to talk about it, and they're just happy we're there and we're fine and we're able to come home. So I know it takes a toll on them. Can you talk on that?
Absolutely. Spousal support is so important, but many times we don't know what that looks like, or we, as the firefighter coming home to our spouse, really don't know what to ask for. And, I made very, very large mistakes in that piece. I would come home and not talk about what I experienced. I would shut down, and I did that for quite some time. And my wife and I, we've worked through a lot in our marriage. Our marriage is not perfect. Neither one of us are perfect human beings. We've struggled through things, but we've always been consistent that we're going to work through whatever our challenges are. And as we work through those, we grow stronger, we grow tighter, but we also learn more about each other. And so I would ask you as a firefighter, it's okay to go home and tell your spouse that, I had a rough night. I may need like 10 or 15 minutes by myself. If I'm not talking, it's not that I'm mad at you or I don't want to talk to you. I just don't really know how to express myself at this moment. I just need to go sit alone and just have some silence. I think that when you do that, what it does for the spouse is it gives them an understanding that you're feeling something. When we don't tell them what we've experienced, and I'm not saying tell them the details, they don't need to know that. But when you tell them that you've had that rough night, you really show a vulnerable side of yourself and they can understand that. And I did not do that. I did a terrible job at that. I'm just now learning that as an assistant chief, as I go through my therapy, and I'm, still doing therapy to this day. And I probably will continue to do that for the rest of my life because it's something that really helps me work through it. But it also, I live my message. I'm not sitting in front of you telling you that I am perfect. I am absolutely not. I struggle with this. I will be at my counselor on Friday after I leave work, and I'll be talking through the issues that I have. And I think there's credibility in that because for you as a student listening, you can do the same thing. You just have to be brave enough to talk to someone, but also share those experiences with your spouse. And there was a time that I didn't know how to talk to my spouse, and still to this day there's sometimes I don't, because I don't know how to navigate certain things of how to say things of something that's stressing me out, because I don't want to put that stress on her because she has stress as well. She has a very high stress job. So it's just working through those. And there's times that it may not work. I mean, there's times that in a marriage that there's so much trauma before, during, or even after the marriage, it may just not work. So, but you have to find that common ground between each other and see if it's worth fixing and saving and working through that. And I think that's a huge message for us in the fire service, because you have to realize you work shift work, you have a family, you're missing your family for 24 hours, but on those 24 hours, you get in this, I call it a bubble. You get in this bubble at the station to where, you're with your crew, you're feeling it, but there's times you have downtime by yourself and you have that, you compartmentalize a lot. But then when you come home, you have kids running up to you, your spouse running up to you. And sometimes it's like sensory overload. You don't really know how to feel about it at the point you're trying to come out of this 24-hour shift, and you need a little bit of decompression time. And I relate that sometimes to our military personnel who, today they do so many good things and they can do them so quickly because of the transportation that we have available to us today. They can go somewhere, do a critical mission, and come right back home. And then they walk into their kids and their spouse, and they just got finished this very important mission, but you can't just decompress that quickly. And so, how do we teach our firefighters when they come off duty to decompress? And that's where we try to give examples of, workouts, talking just with your spouse about things that make you feel better. I give the example of journaling, and I know some people say that might not be for them, but some way to get that out. So when you get home, you feel more calm and you feel more connected with your spouse and your kids, because to your spouse and your kids, your daddy, your mommy, they want to see you. They don't see you as just that firefighter, as that chief officer. They want to see you in that state of love and vulnerability. And that's hard to get into that. And I did terrible at that, and I'm still working on it today. And I think as I work through that, I think my marriage will even get better because of that. But, for a good 15 years, I just didn't do a good job. And, on top of that, personally, as I've been traveling for the last 12 years, that puts a heavy toll, on a family. So it's something that I'm always passionate about, because I know how relationships can be. And I know that in the fire service, we sometimes neglect our loved ones because we get so ingrained in our profession. And I'm super guilty of that. And I'm trying to work my way out of that as we speak.
One of the big things that as a peer supporter and we know as peer supporters is anniversaries. Those dates they just bring back so much emotions, especially for you guys. I know you guys do a big thing there. And just you going out speaking on this, I feel like has got to bring up those emotions, just like with the anniversary day or a birthday of one of your fallen brothers. Tell me how you navigate through that and how others could navigate through similar situations, because I feel like it is a tough one. It's always on your mind when you're doing that.
Absolutely. The first piece of that is to understand everyone has their own journey and their own way of honoring those firefighters. not one way is the right way. And I think when you have that respect of each other, I think that gives everybody the willingness to honor the way they feel best. There's some firefighters that cannot come to the memorial site on the day of the event. It's just too hard for them. They have other ways that they honor those firefighters. So I suggest you have to find how you feel purposeful in honoring that anniversary, that birthday, to your comfort level of that level of stress. The first time I went to the anniversary was the year after, and that was very difficult. And then as we started to see their birthdays come and go, I started having these ideas of maybe every time they have a birthday, I would always send something out to the department to say, this is firefighter Brandon Thompson's birthday. He was born May 2nd, 1980. So I send that out May 2nd, 1980. And all 9 firefighters had specific write-ups done for them at the 10-year anniversary by different chief officers in the organization. So I use that and I send that every year. And when I do that, I want our new firefighters to know who these firefighters were, what they stood for, what they believed in, where they came from, what their belief systems were. I want them to understand that because that's a part of their history now as well. And then the other side of that, on their birthdays, I know I go to the site and I'll sing happy birthday to the memorial that we have there. They have markers on the site of where their bodies were found. So that's something I like to do personally. But each person has their own journey. Nothing is right and nothing is wrong. And I think when you start to see people that they disagree with how someone's celebrating an anniversary, and I say celebrating as an honoring, or someone is not, you don't know what they're doing on the other days of the anniversary to honor that firefighter who lost their lives. And so I think that's something we have to keep in mind, and it makes it more powerful because it's different for everyone. My journey is I want to stand at the flagpole at midnight on June 18th as I start. We have a 24-hour watch in Charleston. So at midnight, we start the watch, and every 30 minutes, a new group of people come and they stand for 30 minutes until midnight at the end of June 18th. So it just kind of organically grew. It started before me, and then as people retired, the responsibility was given to me, and I took it very honoring to do that. And so now I start the watch. And then now, since Chief Dan has come into our organization and our deputy chief of ops, they both stand at night and start the watch, and we do it together as leadership to give the example. And then on the back end of it, I usually close it out at midnight. But there's certain firefighters in our organization that are still on the job, and they can't do that. And that's okay. That's not part of their journey. That they're honoring it in the work they do. They're honoring the way they represent the organization, the way they train our personnel in recruit schools. It's not a one size fits all. That's the thing to remember. Just have grace and compassion with each other. Meet them where they are. And I think you'll see a lot more people honoring a lot more effectively.
Awesome. I just have one last question for you. And if there's any other questions from folks that are watching today, please go ahead and put them in the chat in the Q&A. How is the community doing? I know that this event kind of rocked the community when it happened. So not only for the Charleston Fire Department, but also surrounding first responders and family members of the people that were lost in the community as a whole. So how is the community doing now?
The community has been super supportive of us since that day, almost 17 years ago. And our community has grown so much that we have a lot of new people in our area that don't know the history of what happened on that day. And so as we see them, we try to educate them the best we can. We'll see people come out to the site and they'll walk by, and we'll be out there maybe talking to some firefighters or just checking the site to make sure it's okay. And they'll say, hey, what happened here? And we'll tell them what happened. And they just aren't from the area, so they won't know it. But I think it's so critical to mention that even we have all these new individuals moving to the Charleston area. When they go to that site, there's a story being told at that site. There's markers for the corners of the building. There's a marker actually in the ground for where the front door was. So you can stand where the front door was and look at where the firefighters were found inside the building from the search crews. Our next part of that change of the site is we're going to do something called storyboards. So these storyboards are something that you see at a national park, to where you're looking at the Grand Canyon and it has a picture and it says all the history about it. We're going to have about 10 or 11 of those placed throughout the park. So it's basically a walking tour. So the first one will be at the front of the site, and you'll have a picture of what the store looked like. But as you're looking at the storyboard, you can look in front of you and you can see the markers to the corner of the building, so you can get a visual of what it actually looked like. And then it'll talk a little bit about the firefighters who are up to the left, which is Engineer Brad Beatty and firefighter Earl Drayton. They'll talk about who they were, what they stood for, give a history of who they were. We're working to get maybe some QR codes put onto those storyboards to where we can share stories about them from members of our organization or even family members. And then as you progress through the walking tour, it gives you more information: where the fire started, how the fire started. And then also on those storyboards, there's a lesson learned piece. So from that, so when we talk about the event, we talk about the firefighters, but also from that, we tell how we learned from that specific event for this specific part of the event. And that's still in process. We just finished the storyboard writing a few months ago, but that has to go through a very big review from historical data to validate everything that's right. And then it's got to be made. So it's going to be some time until that's done. But I think that's going to make the site very, very, very educational for people that are coming to the Charleston area.
That sounds amazing. That sounds absolutely amazing. And I think it's a great way to, like you said, remind the community about the amazing men and women who were lost that day. Give us some of your final thoughts on ways that other communities can move forward after an incident. We've had kind of two major things here in the state of Michigan. We had an Oxford shooting at a high school, and then also the University of Michigan, Michigan State University shooting as well. And both of these incidents literally shook our state, shook us to the core. And multiple first responder groups were involved in these critical incidences. And so we try, as not only as an FST5 family, but as a state, to wrap around the families, the people impacted by this, but also our first responders, because sometimes they're the ones that people don't remember. So give us your thoughts on how, as a community, we can stay strong in this space.
I think the focus on supporting the first responders and the mental health side of it. Make sure when there's a request for funding to come and build out those programs for peer support, for clinicians, for department clinicians, for therapy dogs, for suicide awareness. These are things that we have to focus on. If you look at the data from many different organizations, it shows that firefighters are more likely to die from suicide than a line of duty death. And that just shows you from these events you just mentioned, but also other events that are going on in the country and the world. Our firefighters are going to these events. If there's a mass shooting, we are going to be there. If there's a fire, we're going to be there. If there's a bomb threat, we're going to be there. If there's any type of emergency, firefighters are going to be there, and they're going to be affected from this. And as a community, I think the more we get that information out to them, so they realize that we're not just fighting a fire, we're not just going to calls, that afterwards we need that support for cancer, for wellness, for cardiovascular health, for mental health, for all these things. I think that focus is so important. And we've done a good job in our area of educating our city council and our mayor and, our decision makers that, we need funding for that. So if organizations can replicate that, you will see a big change in that area.
Absolutely. Colby, any final thoughts before we?
Yeah. One of the questions I have kind of goes to when these events happen, especially now when you got Facebook and you got like all the news articles, and we're really good at going into the comment sections because we want to see people comment, and those could trigger a lot of emotions that can cause issues. And like I know the memorial site just several years back was vandalized. So how do you keep those emotions in check with not only yourself, but checking in on those members when they do see stuff like that happens? Because it's hard sometimes to keep those emotions in check when you're seeing stuff like that happen, and then you see comments and whatnot.
Very much so. I think that's so much of an individual thought process. Like for me, the way someone speaks of you says more about them than what it says about you. So if you digest that and you take that from the comments that are made, that's just part of, unfortunately, part of social media and the internet today. You have to be able to work through that and know that. And I usually don't click on the comments. That's usually things that we hear as leaders when we go through different classes, is don't click on the comments, because that's a part of our way we communicate as a society today. People are allowed to give their opinions, and some of them are very good and some of them are very harsh. But as you work through that, some of those we just have to read through, and we have to just digest them and stomach them and know that that's going to happen. The biggest thing is it's the way you respond to that emotionally. If you let it get to you every time, it's really going to wear you down, and it's going to beat your body down, physically, emotionally, psychologically, all these things. And it's going to affect the way that you're talking with people, the way you sleep, the way you treat your family and your friends. So, like I say, just be nice. I mean, Brunacini said that so long, be nice. And, I have a wristband it says, be kind to your mind. And that's something that I was given, as I work through my therapy. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and be kind. And I know that probably for some people watching, I'm a firefighter, that doesn't sound, that's corny, but to me, it's just not. I don't understand why we just can't do that and work through things together with a little bit more grace and compassion. But I understand it's the world that we live in, and you're just going to have to navigate that the best you can. I do have to say hi to Chief Bob. I saw he said, "Hey, Dr. Dave, Fez the 11."
Yes, awesome. Okay, so we have one last question. It says, what type of initial, and we talked about this a little bit, but some people didn't get on to hear our kind of earlier conversations, but what type of initial education does your department offer new hires to prepare them for events up front? What has been done to start the new culture in the organization? What has worked? I've had a few calls, so I'm sorry if this was addressed earlier, but no worries about that. Just wanting to know, what are some reactive and proactive things that can be done?
Absolutely. Great question. So what we do in our recruit school is, on the front end, very early on, we talk about our mental health services that we provide, from low country firefighter support team to also the first responder support team, and also what we provide as peer support members. But we couple that with a class on June 18th, 2007, to talk about what happened on the day of the event. We talk about the days, months, years after the mental health aspect of it. And then we take them out to the Sofa Superstore site, which is now called the Charleston 9 Memorial Site. And different firefighters that were on the scene that day, they come out and we give stories about the firefighters who passed away there. And then we also talk about how that affected us mentally. And we tell them those stories because we want them to realize that everything we taught you this morning about mental health before you came out to the site, that's why we brought you out here, to show you that we're still working through this 17 years later. So we want you to know that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay that you have these struggles. If you had childhood traumas, if you have combat traumas, we understand. We want to get you those services because we have them. And so we're very, very proactive on that. I'm super passionate about it because I think you should do that before you do anything else. If you do the numbers in your organization about how much you fight fire, for us, it's 0.08% of the time. But mental health is a large percentage of what we do as people, just dealing with the job. And now you add in the shift work, moms, dads, all of those things in life. And so we try to give that on the front end so they know that they have that support. Through their career, what I would like to see us do better is more continuing education on mental health. And I think that's something we're still trying to work through. How does that look? Is it a course that we do and we have many officer development parts? Is that something we do in one of our officer development classes? Both of those. Is it something we do as people are promoted to different positions, just to give them that continuing education of, as a frontline supervisor, this is what you're looking for in your members when they come back from a call. If they're responding this way, maybe this is what needs to be done. This is who you can call. Here's the numbers. And so we do some of that. I know there's room to improve on that. But I think as long as you have some type of journey on the mental health side with everything else that we're supposed to know in our job, from the day we walk on it to the day we walk off, your knowledge will grow in that area too. And that's huge. Just like anything else, you got to be knowledgeable.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. This was an amazing conversation. And you did mention we are going to wrap up on that this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So May is a very good month to talk to your family members, your friends, your coworkers, your fellow first responders about reaching out in any kind of way, learning new coping skills that can help them get to day to day. Just like you mentioned, the statistic, which is true for firefighters, that most of our firefighters are dying by suicide than they are the line of duty deaths. However, that covers all 5 disciplines that we cover, which is fire, EMS, 911, dispatch, and corrections. That statistic is pretty high in the state of Michigan, and nationwide it is growing. And so we want people to know that they have a place to reach out to. They have people that they can turn to. There's peers throughout the state. There's peers within this program. Please don't hesitate to reach out. 1-833-34-78766. That is the call line that our first responders and their families can call directly and talk to someone in the moment, and not have to worry about being on hold or the call being transferred or any of those things. There are people here for you. And same for our website. So we want you to take the time to reach out. Also, there's a nationwide suicide prevention and intervention line, which is the 9889. You can dial that from any phone, cell phone, landline phone, that you can get yourself on and talk to someone that could help you get into a better space. So, Kobe, any additional thoughts? Again, I thank you all for being with us again on a Wednesday evening when we're finally having summer in the state of Michigan. I'm sure you guys have already started that, Dr. Griffin. You guys have started summer already, but we're just now getting it. So we want to encourage people to still pop in with us once a month. We are sticking to our final Wednesdays of every month at 7 p.m. Just to have these conversations to remind people that we're here to help. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you again. I really appreciate you always being willing to do this. It means a lot to us, and keep up the good work. I'll be excited to get you up here live.
Awesome. Dr. Griffin, go ahead and end us with all the things that you're doing, ways people can get into contact with you, as well as social media's contact as well.
I'm not here to sell you on anything, so I'm pretty easy to find. I just want you to walk away from this with something that you can help each other, take care of each other, take care of your families, your moms, your dads, your brothers, your sisters, the people that you work with on the job. That's the most important thing. So if I can ever help you, you can find me pretty easily, and I'll be glad to help. I just appreciate you being here tonight. Please don't think I'm an expert. As I said, I'm not. Just try to share a few stories to hope give you some inspiration to realize that you got to finish the race. That's the main point, is finish the race, find your purpose, and you can do good things, but you just have to be willing to find that. So I can't thank you enough. Honored to be here, and I hope you all have a great night.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you in June. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.